The Miami Dolphins' future is murky in more ways than one, and we're exploring the depths of their path at quarterback here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special and welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network, and we want to thank you for helping to make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We are talking quarterback today on the show. And I think what most fans would probably agree on at this stage is that the next chapter, long-term chapter of the Dolphins organization probably will not have Tua Tagovailoa serving as the team's long-term answer at the quarterback position. Tua is a player who's regressed this year in a handful of different ways. He's a player who has well-documented durability questions. He's a player who's done well to protect himself and mitigate hits and keep himself on the field thus far this season without interruption. But it's really underscored some of the ways in which he talks about the conviction in which he plays. You haven't seen it on a week in and week out basis, not with consistency. And when you're in the stratosphere of quarterbacks that Tua Tagovailoa is now in, it comes with a different set of expectations as far as the product and what you can provide week to week, year to year. And with a new general manager who's coming in, refocus on youth on the roster and building a roster up, I think Tua is kind of in the Alex Smith at Kansas City type of tenure as the starting quarterback in Miami. Not comparing their skill sets, but just like Kansas City had Alex Smith and they were competitive for quite some time, but you knew that there were limitations there. And Kansas City tried to find an opportune time to make a transition and target someone else. And the unique part about the Tua situation in Miami is the durability element. You're always going to have to be overinvested in the other quarterbacks in the room relative to some other teams across the league. So with the new GM, potentially a new coach, all of those things stacking and projecting into the future, Tua Tagovailoa probably not going to be your long-term answer at the quarterback position beyond this year, potentially next year. But the Dolphins are going to be shopping with open eyes, I think. And I think they should be. I think they're right to. You want to have another chance to raise the bar of quarterback play in Miami. After Dan Marino, the bar in Miami was so low for so long that we get Chad Pennington, and it was a revelation. And then you get Ryan Fitzpatrick, and it made it fun again, right? Like Ryan Tannehill was kind of the, okay, our quarterback's going to have more touchdown passes than interceptions. That's a nice change of pace from what it's been. But the Dolphins couldn't put the right environment around Tannehill like what he went into at Tennessee, where he had success and they won a bunch of playoff games, and they won a bunch of games, I should say, and they were the 1 seed in the AFC one year. And Ryan Fitzpatrick raised the bar of like, hey, it's fun, right? And then Tua Tagovailoa, once you got past the Brian Flores years, there was a certain level of efficiency and prolific explosive plays that the Dolphins had not seen in a really long time. But what other pitches do you have in the bag? And I think that's where the Dolphins are at now, looking at their future. And why, when you're looking for the future of the team, you're probably looking at transitioning away from a lot of your big contracts. And I think Tua has to be part of that conversation. Not that it has to happen now, right? Because I think it'd be reckless to make a change just for the sake of making a change and not having an answer. That's what they're faced with. And that's what this show is about now that we're 5 minutes in and I got all of the qualifiers off my chest that comes anytime you talk about Tua Tagovailoa to the fan base. So what happens if the Dolphins keep winning? Where does this team's assets go? What does that mean for the team and their draft outlook at quarterback? And what does the draft class mean? And what does free agency look like? And are there attractive names there? Regardless of whether or not you make coaching changes. So what I did is I picked the rest of the games on the schedule, not just for Miami, but for every team, trying to be predictive and looking at, how this year is going to play itself out. And what I ended up coming to is I do think the Dolphins are going to push for 500 this year. Potentially better, right? Like, I think they'll win the next two. I think that gets you to 6-7. I think there's a very legitimate chance that they beat the Steelers because they're a hot mess express right now. They're a hot mess of a football team. They went from 4-1 to 5-6. The playoffs started today. They'd be out. They started the season 4-1. And you get the Bengals. And yeah, Joe Burrow's back, but that defense is catastrophically bad in Cincinnati. And that's a home game for Miami. I think at least you win 3 of the next 4 games. Potentially, if not more. But that would put you at 7-8. If you win 3 out of the next 4, you're 7-8 with 2 games left to play. Are the Patriots playing for anything? Week 18, do they have a first round bye already? Is their seeding locked in no matter what? Tampa's banged up. They're amongst the most banged up teams in the league. They're giving up 30 points. They've given up 30 points or more in games as many times this year as they had in the past 2 seasons combined, right? Like they've given up a lot of points lately. I could see Miami pushing based on the schedule 8-9. I think your best case scenario is probably 9-8. I don't expect them to run the table and win the rest of their games. But somewhere between 7-10 and 9-8 is where I expect this team to finish from a win-loss record standpoint. That's going to put you in, and having picked all of the games, that will put you picking somewhere between 12th and 17th in the draft order. Not necessarily prime quarterback territory, right? So the question is, what options are you going to have? Are there swings of the bat that you should take? And I think the Dolphins are at the point in time of the tenure where regardless of if you draft a guy in the first round or not, I think you're at a point where you need to add new every year. It is jarring. It's jarring to look at the Dolphins draft history at the quarterback position. And I'm not saying you have to draft a guy in the first round or in the second round or in the top 100. You could use a draft pick or you could use resources to bring a quarterback in free agency, or you could bring a quarterback in via trade, something else different to add to the room. I think they have to do that every year at this stage. But their draft history at the quarterback position is jarring. We're going to talk about that on the other side of it. Then we're going to do some veteran names. Then we're going to do some draft class specifics based on if the Dolphins keep winning at the trajectory that I think expectations should have them at. So that's all next here, Locked on Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Listen, if you're a Dolphins fan like me, you've probably experienced this. You drop more than $100 on parking at Hard Rock Stadium. You battle the traffic getting in, and then you sit in your car for an hour trying to leave when the game wraps up. What if I told you there was a better way? I found this new app that I think could help you out. Dibs is a platform that connects you with verified homeowners and businesses near the stadium who rent out their driveways and lots on game day. We're talking about spots as low as $25. That's up to 80% cheaper than stadium parking, and you'll get in and out way faster. Every host is verified and rated, so you know exactly what you're getting. Dibs is available for games and events at the Hard Rock Stadium and is expanding across the state of Florida. Call Dibs for your spot today and use code LOCKEDON20 for 20% off of your first booking. The Dolphins draft history at the quarterback position. They, of course, drafted a 7th-round quarterback in 2025, and his name was Quinn Ewers. You have to go back to 2022, the year before that, or for the next quarterback before Quinn Ewers, and that was Skylar Thompson. Okay, so you have 2 7th-round picks invested in the quarterbacks from 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. Tua Tagovailoa, 5th overall 2020. Brandon Doughty from Western Kentucky, 223rd overall in 2016. Ryan Tannehill, 8th overall in 2012. That's it since 2010. 2 first-round quarterbacks and 3 7th-round quarterbacks. Then you get a stretch of 3 straight years in which to use a 2nd-round pick on a quarterback. Pat White, 2009. Bill Parcells was ahead of his time. No, he was not. Chad Henne, 57th overall, 2008. John Beck, 40th overall, 2007. Josh Heupel, 177th overall, 2001. John Dutton, 6th round, 1998. Mark Bassotti, 296th overall in 1992. Scott Mitchell is probably the next most meaningful quarterback the Dolphins have drafted, and that came in 1990. 93rd overall. You know how old I was when the Dolphins drafted Scott Mitchell as, like, besides your 2 starting quarterbacks? And then I guess Chad Henne. John Beck was an abject disaster in Miami. Henne started some games, but it was Pennington's show, really. And then Tannehill and Tua. Scott Mitchell, the 4th most meaningful quarterback you've drafted. I was probably celebrating my 1st birthday the month that they drafted Scott Mitchell. They just have not invested especially as an organization that has not had answers for so long at quarterback. It blows my mind that, like, yeah, you used a 2nd-round pick for A.J. Feely, right? But, like, where are the swings of the bat? You didn't even give yourself a chance to find a Russell Wilson or a Dak Prescott or a Tom Brady, and that's the most extreme example, and I get that. You didn't give yourself a chance to find any of these guys because you haven't drafted quarterbacks. Since 2010, it's been 2 first-round guys and 3 7th-round guys, and that's it. So we need more swings of the bat for alternative players, so you never know when you're going to catch lightning in a bottle with the right guy in the right scheme, with the right coach, and the right players around him. It happens across the league, but only if you give yourself a chance. So what I want to do is, if you end up picking between 12 and 17 in the draft order, which is the range of records that I can foresee for Miami and what that means for your draft capital, you're probably not in a marquee position to draft a Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana. It sounds like Dante Moore from Oregon is going to go back to school. It sounds like Lenore Sellers from South Carolina is going to end up in the transfer portal. Ty Simpson from Alabama is a first-year starter. He might not even come out. You look up and down at a lot of the hot names, and there's not a lot of momentum for a lot of these guys coming out and being in this year's class. Well, that leaves you with Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, potentially names like Brendan Sorsby at Cincinnati, who I'm a really big fan of. Doesn't sound like John Mateer's coming out. He really hasn't had the momentum after a good first month of the season. Jordan Maeva from USC. not guaranteed to come out. And if that's what you're left with, beyond names that are further down in the quarterback rankings that are day 3 guys, and we'll talk about some of them, you're kind of in this, who can you target and acquire? Who can you go out and add? And especially if you end up keeping Tua on the roster in 2026. And this is for me, like, I'm only fully moving on from Tua in one of 2 ways. Your GM / if you make a head coaching change, if they decide we're taking the job, if we're going to take the lumps and we're out, we don't want it. And if the people that you're committed to being those people for your team say, I'm only taking the job if we do this, then I think you have to do it. Because I think that choice supersedes what your stability is at quarterback. Because if you really believe in those people, they will get their chance to pick their person. And if they want that chance to pick their person without any overhead from a pre-existing regime, so be it, right? Like, you got to do what you got to do. So that's option A. Option B is if you secure what you believe to be a better option from the jump. Now, if you are in a position, like, say, hypothetically, you want to make the splash and the Titans get the first overall pick, and you think you can get there from wherever you're starting, and you make whatever deal that you want to make, and you get up there, and I think that's a bad idea from trading a bunch of assets to go up and get an unproven quarterback with where this team is at from needing young players in the pipeline, this, that, the other thing, right? Like, I think it's a horrible idea, but if you want to do that and you go up and you get the first overall pick because you fall in love with the quarterback, then yeah, do what you can to transition, and you can move on from Tua and take your lumps from the cap perspective in 2025. But other than that, like, if you're going to pay $53 million regardless, you might as well pay for him to be on the roster, and you could start to swing the bat and take some targets at names, and it would be most likely names across the league, right? Because that's where you're going to have some opportunities to add some names. Because if you think about teams across the league that have quarterbacks that maybe if weren't out there welcome, maybe they're going to be available to trade. Just naming some names. I'm not saying that I want any of these players, but considering potential trade targets across the league at the quarterback position. Starting the NFC West. San Francisco's got both Brock Purdy and Mac Jones. Mac Jones has played better than Brock Purdy has this season. He's under contract in 2026. Would the 49ers cash out on Mac Jones? Would they look to do what Miami could look to do with Tua and try to transition from Brock Purdy and just give the keys to the car to Mac Jones? I don't know. I would imagine all those conversations are on the table for a team like San Francisco. Arizona's Cardinals. Kyler Murray is widely expected to be moved on from this offseason. New Orleans, Spencer Rattler ceded the job to Tyler Shuck. 5th-round rookie, had a chance to start, showed some growth, but they need to know what they have with their top draft choice at quarterback in this past year's class, and they might be in position to draft another quarterback next year, and both of them might be available. Who knows? Carolina with Bryce Young, his splits versus the Atlanta Falcons versus the 31 other teams in the NFL is laughable. It's like his pass ratings 20, 25 points higher against every other team against Atlanta than every other team in the NFL combined. Do they move on? They're getting ready to make a 5th-year option decision with Bryce Young. J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota. An uncomfortable situation. Looks like it's all above his head a little bit, but he's a young quarterback. But Minnesota let Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold walk out the door this offseason. Are they going to stay convicted to J.J. McCarthy? Are they going to hedge their bet? They want to move on? Like, it's worth the question. Malik Willis in Green Bay, backup quarterback, set to be a free agent this year, along with Trey Lance with the Chargers, former top 5 pick. Let's see. I'd be surprised if Washington made Marcus Mariota available. He's under contract next year. Jaden Daniels been hurt and banged up. Tanner McKee in Philadelphia. The Eagles love flipping picks, and I know that A.J. Feely scar I just opened up for a bunch of fans. Do we want to do that again? Probably not. But Tanner McKee's a liked quarterback who's not getting a chance to play because he's behind Jalen Hurts. Geno Smith's probably going to be available because the Raiders are going to tear that thing up. They already fired Chip Kelly. I would expect Pete Carroll, who's the oldest coach in the league, is probably going to be let go at the end of the year. They're It's a horrible operation. I'd expect he will be available. Let's see. We already talked about Trey Lance at the Chargers. What's Will Levis' situation this offseason? Former top 40 pick. From an efficiency standpoint, Cam Ward has struggled in some of the same ways. I think Cam Ward's a much better player than Will Levis is, but Levis, guy that you'd love to see him in a different environment with a different team. Because I don't think Tennessee, Aaron Brewer, they couldn't get rid of Aaron Brewer fast enough in Tennessee. What's Aaron Brewer been for Miami, right? Like sometimes guys just need to change the scenery, coach him a little differently. I wouldn't dismiss Will Levis as an option. He's out for the year with a shoulder injury. I'd be intrigued to try it as a swing of the bat. Seemed like they were on a way towards a split before he got hurt this year anyway. Davis Mills in Houston, the team's 3-0 with him. He's on a multi-year contract as a backup quarterback. Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. Former top 10 draft pick at the quarterback position, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN just reported he'd be really intrigued by playing for a Shanahan-style offense. And you don't get much different from a traits perspective from Tua Tagovailoa to Anthony Richardson. But I'd have the conversation. I'd pick them up, call the phone, figure out what they want. If you want to take a swing at a bat at a guy who's a cost-controlled player on a rookie contract that you don't have to pay the signing bonus to, it might be better than taking the 12th overall pick or trying to trade up. Because it's not just the quarterback, right? It's what else can you put around the quarterback? What kind of infrastructure can you provide the quarterback? And Ryan Tannehill's a great example of that for what he was in Miami versus what he was when he had Derrick Henry and that offensive line in Tennessee. Looking at the rest of the teams, we didn't do the AFC North and the AFC East. I don't think Cleveland has anybody that's going to be particular of interest to me that's going to be available. Jake Browning, no thank you. Pittsburgh, no thank you with anything that they have going on. Baltimore's new backup is Miami's old backup, Snoop Huntley, no thank you. Justin Fields, no thank you. But like he probably going to be available because the Jets are going to be positioned to pick a quarterback or acquire somebody with all the picks that they have. We had a bunch of names here. Now, not all of them are going to be free agents. You might have to trade for some of these guys. But if you're going to keep Tua on the roster in 2026, you want to open up the possibilities for somebody else to potentially transition into the job. There's a number of names here that I think are interesting. Not all of them are long-term answers, but some of these are really, whether they're on rookie contracts or they're backup quarterbacks who have never really gotten a chance to play or haven't got a chance to play in multiple years. There's some names here that would have my interest. And this is the pathway that I think is probably the most likely, assuming Tua is on the books for $53 million guaranteed, assuming a new GM hire and a new head coach, potential new head coach hire. Don't hold your feet to the fire and say, we want to take the lumps this year. We want to get out of it. We want to move on and we just don't want to deal with it. This might be more attractive than picking 12th unless somebody slides into your lap. And teams figure it out. You just need the right decision makers in place to help figure it out. And I know that hasn't been the case in Miami, so it feels like this dire situation. You just have to change the way you do your business. And that goes all the way up to the amount of swings that you've taken at quarterback or the lack thereof, plus being willing to churn the room and embrace the competition with talent and see who levels up their game. But I think the first step in this process is admitting the juncture that we are at. It's probably high time to shop with open eyes. We're going to talk about a little bit more about the draft outlook of this on the other side of it. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or if you want to ride the hot hand throughout, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is the one that is making that late-game push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I say all this to say as well, because I know there's a I've been accused by the pro Tua subsection of the fan base as being very anti-Tua, and I've been accused from the anti-Tua subsection of the fan base from being a Tuaneer. And it's because the truth so often falls in the middle of the two extreme ends of the spectrum. Not everything that the Dolphins have going on as far as issues with the team right now is Tua Tagovailoa's fault. But there are limitations. There's been things I've been thinking about is going all the way back as far as like your style of play, your style of play at the quarterback position, your physical skill set of your quarterback. How does that impact how teams play you? How does that impact blitz rate? How does that impact your coverage? How does that impact the spacing of the coverage on the back end? That's before you get into the arm strength questions or being able to drive throws with consistency from 10 to 19 yards outside the numbers or being able to hit deep shots outside of the timing of an initial drop out of the gun, like 3 and a hitch or 5 and a hitch out of the gun or 7-step and a hitch from under center. If you don't hit it within the hitch, usually you don't have enough club in the bag to get it down there, right? So that changes how teams approach you. There's a change in teams' pass rush plan for coming in to prepare for you because you know you're dealing with relatively a static player in the pocket. You can win with that, but you got to have the other answers to the quiz on any given play to do that with consistency. And this year it's regressed. And as you project it forward, that's where the concern comes in, right? But not everything is Tua's fault. And I don't want to sit here and say, hey, the Dolphins replace Tua, all their problems are going to go away. I don't think that's a very fair reflection of the concept of team and football and 53 players, plus however many coaches, plus the practice squad, plus your front office executive in your football operation from the top down. There's a lot more that goes into it. Now, your margin for error is a lot wider when you have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson, or I think you could go as far as like a Matthew Stafford, right? So that part of it is challenging. You don't have as wide of a margin, in my opinion, but it doesn't mean you can't win. But if Tua is going to continue to regress at the rate that he did this year, it's going to accelerate your clock. The draft. We talked about names like Ty Simpson potentially going back. So let's live in this world. Let's pretend Ty Simpson goes back to Alabama as a first-year starter. Let's pretend Dante Moore goes back to Oregon, which has been widely reported as the assumed action there. Let's assume that Arch Manning goes back to Texas. Probably a pretty safe assumption. He's been on the record for a while saying, it's the Manning family expects Arch to stay at Texas another year. Let's say Maeva from USC goes back. Let's say Lenore Sellers goes into the transfer portal. Let's say John Mateer goes back to Oklahoma. Let's say, how far down the list do we need to go here? Let's say all of those things happen. Not outside the realm of possibility. Fernando Mendoza is probably going to be the top quarterback in the class. I don't think Fernando Mendoza is the, oh my God, we have to tank for this guy type of player. But I think the scarcity of the quarterbacks in the class that you perceive to be on that stratosphere make it more likely he gets overdrafted, especially if teams like, as I have it picked right now, like the Raiders or the Jets or the Saints or the Cardinals or the Browns, like those are all teams that I have currently projected picking in the top 8. They're all potential quarterback teams. And you get the Steelers potentially in this stratosphere along with Miami. You've got the Vikings with the questions with J.J. McCarthy. Realistically, the only top 12 teams I have that are not quarterback need teams are the Titans because they just took Cam Ward first overall. The Commanders with Jaden Daniels. The Giants with Jackson Dart overall. And the Bengals with Joe Burrow. There's a lot of possible landmines that all potentially end up being in front of you if the Dolphins continue to win enough games. So probably safe to assume Mendoza's not going to be on your list. That leaves Carson Beck, Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik. I really like Brendan Sorsby. I think he's a day 2 quarterback. A little rough around the edges, but man, he's got some electric play on tape. I know there's a lot of fans that exist of Taylon Green at Arkansas. But if that's the kind of stratosphere that you live in, this is now the question you have to ask yourself. Is hypothetically, the Dolphins have 3 third-round picks. If you want to introduce somebody new to your quarterback room, is it better to pair all these top 100 picks and probably a future one to go up and get the one guy? Is it better to use a day 2 swing on a name like a Beck or an Aller or a Sorsby? Or is it better to take a mid-round pick like potentially a 3 or a 4 and trade for a veteran quarterback, especially one that's on a cost control contract because he's on a rookie contract, like hypothetically, like an Anthony Richardson or like a Mac Jones who's owed like $4 million on a 1-year deal for 2026. I'll let you make that decision and that judgment on what you think is best. But of all of these options, the worst thing you can do is just kind of put the hands up and say, well, nah, we got 2 under contract. We're just going to keep rolling. Because that's what you've been doing. And I don't think you can afford to operate that way with that psychology anymore to make sure that you can build the rest of this roster up and simultaneously land on your feet. Now, if you end up picking 9 because the wheels fall off the bus and you finish 6-11 and, a couple of teams in front of you go with vets, like if the Jets go with Kyler Murray, right? And the Browns trade for Anthony Richardson and who's another team that the Saints really like what they end up getting from Tyler Shuck, and the Cardinals roll with Jacoby Brissett and Fernando Mendoza falls in your lap, draft him. Yes. But I don't think it's safe to assume, nor should that be the only acceptable outcome, because there's so many examples across the rest of the league where there's viable to good quarterback play that is found in other ways. Jalen Hurts was a 2nd-round pick. Dak Prescott was a 4th-round pick. The Giants traded up from the late 2nd to go up and get Jackson Dart. I'm just going through teams in the standings. Green Bay got Jordan Love in the 20s. They traded up from 30 to 26 with Miami. Detroit traded for Jared Goff. Tampa Bay signed Baker Mayfield in a free agent contract and ended up giving a 3-year, $100 million contract. The Rams traded for Matthew Stafford. Seattle signed Sam Darnold to the Baker Mayfield contract, and he's been spectacular. Now, it's regressed a little bit in recent weeks, sure. Mac Jones has been the 49ers' best quarterback thus far this season. He signed on a 2-year contract for $8.5 million in total value. It's a little different on the AFC side of things. The Chiefs, they trade up and draft Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers organically draft Herbert. The Broncos organically draft Bo Nix. The Titans organically draft Cam Ward. The Texans organically draft CJ Stroud. Jacksonville organically drafts Trevor Lawrence. The Colts signed Daniel Jones. Baltimore trades up out of the 2nd round to come back in and get Lamar Jackson at the end of the 1st round. The Bills trade up several times to go get Josh Allen. There's a lot of good answers here that is not, oh, well, we stunk to high heaven and picked a guy high. That's my thoughts on the matter. Kyle Krabs, appreciate you guys checking out the show. Keep it locked in here, Locked on Dolphins. It is your team every day. I'll be back to talk to you all again soon. Go Fins.